You think you use social media. You don't. Social media uses you. And I don't mean that as a metaphor or a bumper sticker. I mean it as an accounting statement. Right now, literally right now, while you're watching this, there is a real dollar amount attached to your focus, a price. And somewhere in a data center you'll never visit, companies are bidding on it in real time, competing for the right to occupy the next 30 seconds of your consciousness. Most people have never seen that number. The companies that profit from it would very much like to keep it that way. So today, we're going to do something these platforms genuinely don't want you to do. We're going to run the math. We're going to find out exactly what your attention is worth, who's buying it, how they're taking it, and what it's costing you in ways that never show up on any bill. Because here's the thing. You've been told this is a fair trade. Free search, free messages, free video, free entertainment, and in exchange, a few ads. Seems reasonable. That is not what's happening. What's actually happening is one of the largest financial extractions in human history. And the raw material they're extracting? It's not your data, it's your consciousness. Before we get into the numbers, one thing has to be completely clear. Your attention is not infinite. It is a finite resource, the only one on Earth that can't be refilled, replaced, or refunded. Every hour of focus you spend somewhere is an hour that literally cannot exist anywhere else. This isn't a productivity guru cliche. This is how cognition actually works. And the companies we're about to look at, they understand this better than most neuroscientists do, because they have something neuroscientists don't: 3.58 billion daily test subjects and a direct financial incentive to figure out exactly which stimuli will keep those subjects locked in for one more minute. That's the architecture we're walking into. Let's start with the number most people have never heard. In 2025, Meta, Facebook, Instagram, Messenger, WhatsApp, all of it, generated $297 billion in revenue. Almost all of it came from advertising. Now here's the number that actually matters. Meta tracks something called the average revenue per person, the ARPP. In Q4 of 2025, that number was $60.56 per quarter, not per year, per quarter. That's what your attention generated for them, every 3 months, whether you felt it or not. And that's the global average. In the United States and Canada specifically, the number goes much higher. Meta pulled $78.87 billion from North American users alone, nearly 40% of its total global revenue from a fraction of its global users. Run that math and American attention is generating over $70 per person per year for Meta alone. And that's just Meta. TikTok's average revenue per user, $17 torrode. Google and YouTube, when you fold in ad revenue across search and streaming, operate at similar scale. These are not speculative projections. These are the documented, audited, quarterly reported market rates for your cognitive real estate. The platforms have already answered the question, what is your attention worth? They just never told you the answer. But those platform revenue numbers, they're only the surface. Researchers have built a framework called the attention equation. It calculates the actual dollar value generated per hour of human focus across different kinds of media. And the results are clarifying. Live sports, $33 per hour. Amusement parks, $24. Live concerts, $17. Streaming movies, $7.18. Books, $0.37. Social media posts, $0.25 per hour, 25 cents per hour. That sounds almost insulting, right? Almost nothing. But here's what 25 cents actually means at scale. Take 0.25, multiply it by 3.58 billion daily users, each spending an average of 2 hours and 21 minutes on the platform, and you get roughly $2.1 billion per day. That's the arithmetic of scale. A quarter at a time, 3.5 billion times. Every single day. Your quarter is small. The pile is not. Now let's meet someone. Her name is Sarah. She's 29, works in marketing, makes about $62,000 a year. She uses Instagram for around 2 hours a day, TikTok for maybe 45 minutes, YouTube for an hour in the evenings. She checks Twitter in the morning while she's having coffee. She'd describe herself as a pretty conscious tech user. Not addicted, just connected, aware. Let's look at her actual numbers. On Instagram alone, Sarah is generating roughly $20 in equivalent advertising value per month for Meta. That's based on the average CPM, cost per 1,000 impressions. that advertisers pay on the platform. Sarah sees hundreds of ads per session. She's not the customer. She is the inventory. Across all her platforms, Sarah is generating somewhere between $60 and $90 in advertising value per month. Call it $900 a year. This is not money she's paid. It's value that flows, silently, from her consciousness into corporate balance sheets every single time she opens an app. But here's what makes Sarah's situation genuinely interesting. She thinks she's relaxing. Now, here's where it gets darker. The dollar figures are only half the story. The other half is how the extraction actually works. Because the platforms aren't just showing you content and hoping you stick around. They're engineering your experience at a neurological level, specifically targeting the evolutionary vulnerabilities that are already built into your brain. This isn't speculation. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It's documented product design. Let's start with dopamine. There are two types that matter here. Tonic dopamine is your baseline, the background hum of motivation that keeps you functional day to day. When it's high, you feel sharp, present, capable. When it's low, you feel flat, bored, like something's missing. Phasic dopamine is different. It's the spike, the brief, intense burst of neurological signal that fires when something unexpected or rewarding happens. Scientists call the trigger a reward prediction error. Basically, the gap between what you expected and what you actually got. That gap is where the dopamine lives. This is exactly how slot machines work. You pull. You don't know if this one's a winner or a loser. That uncertainty generates anticipation, and that anticipation generates a phasic spike, whether you win or not. The not knowing is the mechanism. Instagram's pull to refresh is a slot machine. TikTok's infinite scroll is a slot machine. The algorithm doesn't mix boring and stimulating content by accident. It does it because that variable reward schedule, unpredictable, intermittent, impossible to anticipate, is the single most addictive mechanism ever identified in behavioral psychology. It causes compulsive engagement patterns to form 3 to 4 times faster than predictable rewards. Sarah isn't scrolling because she lacks discipline. She's scrolling because she's human. And the system was specifically built to exploit that. But dopamine is only the first layer. When novelty stops being enough, when you've scrolled past the funny clip and the surprising story and the heartwarming reunion video, the algorithm doesn't give up. It pivots, goes deeper, to the bottom of the brainstem, the amygdala. The amygdala is your alarm system. It evolved over millions of years to detect threats, predators, hostile humans, dangerous terrain. When it activates, it doesn't ask for permission. It hijacks your full attention. Heart rate spikes, focus narrows, every other thought gets pushed out. Here's what platforms figured out. Content that triggers anger, fear, or moral outrage activates the amygdala before the prefrontal cortex, the rational, evaluating part of your brain, can even register what's happening. The emotional reaction fires first. The thought comes after. Sometimes much after. Research shows posts with hostile language receive 2.3 times more engagement than neutral ones. Not because people enjoy being angry, because anger is one of the few states the brain literally cannot ignore. It's wired to hold your attention, and the algorithm knows it. This is why you've had the experience of closing Instagram feeling worse than when you opened it, but doing it again anyway an hour later. The content that makes you feel terrible is exactly the content that the algorithm knows will hold your attention the longest. It's not a bug, it's the business model. Now, here's the part most people miss, because it's the hardest to measure. The platforms profit from your attention. That part is visible. It shows up in quarterly earnings reports. But you pay for that profit in a currency that never appears on any financial statement. Cognitive scientists call it the switching cost. Every time you check a notification, every single time, your brain has to disengage from what it was doing, reorient to the interruption, process it, and then attempt to rebuild the mental state it had before. That reconstruction costs energy, real, biological energy, even when it takes only seconds, even when the notification was nothing. And then there's attentional residue. After you put the phone down, part of your focus stays tethered to whatever you just saw. You're physically back at your desk. Mentally, you're still half on that post, still half on that argument. That residue accumulates through the day, quietly degrading everything else you try to do. And then there's the deepest cost, the one that builds over months. Sustained exposure to amygdala-activating content, the rage economy, gradually raises your baseline level of irritability, distrust, and background anxiety. Not dramatically, just enough. Enough to measurably change how you read your relationships, how you interpret ambiguous situations, how safe the world feels when you close your eyes at night. People tracking their own usage report losing 3 to 5 hours daily on a single platform, often with no clear memory of what they actually watched. They describe their fingers moving to unlock the phone before they've consciously decided to. Autopilot, before the thought. And the ones who delete the apps report the same things, almost universally. Better sleep, clearer thinking, and something harder to name, the sensation of having been returned to themselves. That return is the cost the balance sheet never shows. Before we get to what comes next, there's a counter-argument that always gets raised, and it deserves a real answer. The argument goes, the service is free. You get tremendous value. Nobody is forcing you, and if you don't like it, you can leave. Here's why that falls apart. First, the service is not free. The price is just denominated in a currency you weren't told about. You pay with behavioral data, attentional bandwidth, and the monetizable byproducts of your neurological vulnerabilities. No monetary cost is not the same thing as no cost. It never has been. Second, just leave treats this as a fair fight. It isn't. On one side, you, with ordinary human willpower and a busy life. On the other side, a system backed by $72 billion in AI infrastructure investment in a single year, specifically engineered to defeat your willpower, trained on the behavioral data of 3.58 billion people. Calling it a discipline problem is like blaming someone for losing at poker against a professional who can see their cards and control the deck. You're not losing because you're weak. You're losing because the game was never fair. Third, and this one doesn't get enough attention, the advertising model that keeps these platforms free has gutted the business model of local journalism, investigative reporting, and every form of media that depended on a focused audience. The attention economy doesn't just extract from individuals, it extracts from the institutions that a functioning society depends on to stay informed. Now, here's the part of this video I almost didn't include, because it changes the entire math. Everything I've shown you so far, the revenue figures, the dopamine loops, the amygdala targeting, the hidden cognitive costs, all of it describes a system built to capture attention passively, show you content, hold you in the feed, sell your eyeballs. That's the current model. That model is already being replaced. Right now, the major platforms are pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into what they call agentic AI. Not systems that show you content, systems that understand your personal context, your history, your emotional patterns, your vulnerabilities, well enough to make decisions for you. Meta has described the goal in explicit terms: personal superintelligence. An AI that knows you better than you know yourself. One that acts on your behalf, in a way that also happens to serve the platform's commercial interests. Google is integrating AI into search in ways that intercept your queries before they resolve into websites you can actually visit. TikTok's agentic shopping systems are designed to compress the distance between desire and purchase to near zero, removing the small cognitive gap where a person might pause and reconsider. And then there's the hardware. Meta, Google, and others are building augmented reality glasses, devices that overlay the digital feed directly onto your physical field of vision. The current attention economy operates on a screen you occasionally put down. The next version operates on a lens you wear on your face. If the current system monetizes your time on an app, the next one monetizes your experience of reality. The question of who controls your attention is not getting easier. It is approaching a point most people won't see coming, because the transition is being engineered to feel completely natural. So, let's come back to the question. What is your attention actually worth? You now have the answer. In raw platform revenue terms, somewhere between $60 and $200 per year, depending on your platforms and your region. In advertising value generated per hour of your time, $0 to $25. In neurological cost, the switching costs, the attentional residue, the slow elevation of baseline anxiety from daily exposure to a system designed to make you angry, that number isn't fully quantifiable yet. But it is real, and it's accumulating. Every day, the companies know exactly what your attention is worth. They spend hundreds of billions of dollars annually to make sure they can capture it, and thousands of the most sophisticated behavioral scientists and AI engineers in the world to ensure your willpower isn't a sufficient defense. And they've constructed an entire economic argument. It's free, it's your choice. You're getting value. To make sure the conversation stays on their terms, you've now seen the terms. What you do with that information is the only part of this equation they don't control. If this kind of analysis is useful to you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We break down the real mechanics behind the systems that shape how people think, decide, and live.